let us begin. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, as you know, what happened at the end of First Samuel? Does anyone remember what happened at the end of First Samuel? Exactly, exactly. And so, who reported Saul's death? Do you remember? Does anyone remember? Yeah, soldier from the army. Well, in fact, that was Second Samuel actually has something different. It says that it was an Amalekite who reported from the army, concluding that he was most likely lying about being a part of the army. And so he brings the crown of Saul and brings it, saying to David, I was the one who killed Saul, and he told me to fall on my sword. So what that means is he put the sword down, and so Saul could fall on it and die. David wept bitterly after he heard the death of Saul, as you heard in First Samuel. And then, you know what he said to the Amalekite? You guys remember what he said to the Amalekite? Or the person who reported about it? It says at the end of First Samuel. Anyone? So he actually kills the Amalekite for reporting this, because even though he lied about killing Saul, he still said it to David. David thought so he thought that the Amalekite killed God's anointed, because he was anointed by Samuel at the start of First Samuel. Afterwards, the tribes of Judah come up together, and they come up together and crown David as king of Judah. So he goes to Hebron, and does anyone remember what Hebron is? Like what city? Like where? Like it's pretty important. The city. It's a city. It's a city in Judah, which is the tribe of David. So it's like the biggest tribe. Does anyone remember? No one? Okay. So Hebron was the burial place of Abraham, so their forefathers. So it was really important for them. And so this is where David's crowned as king of Judah. However, they actually had a different king for the rest of Israel. The different king was named, it's hard to pronounce, but his name was Ishbosheth. And he's crowned as king of the rest of Israel. The reason why is because former king Saul had a son, and which is Ishbosheth, and he had his commander Abner. His commander Abner went to the tribes of Israel, and he told Israel to pick this guy as king. And so that's what happened. So the 10 tribes picked him as king. So who was his father? Ishbosheth's father? It's not there. Who is Ishbosheth's father? Saul. Okay. Ishbosheth's father, Saul. So Abner, as I said, was the commander of Saul's army. And do you guys remember who was the commander of David's army? He's related to him in some way. This is from 1 Samuel, so about a month ago. Who was the commander of David's army? Who was the commander? You know? Yeah. Anyone remember? Okay, so the commander was actually Joab. And Joab was actually David's sister's son. So David's sister had 3 sons, Joab, Abishai, and Ishmael. Joab was the commander of David's army, and Joab and Abner were obviously enemies because they were both from opposition houses. So David's house and also Saul's house. So they met at the river at one point to have a friendly competition, but it escalated into a battle in which Abner fled, fearing for his life, and Ishmael followed him in hot pursuit, being known for being very fast. And so Abner told Ishmael, says, I don't want to spill blood today. Let's not fight. But Ishmael said, no, we have to fight. We have to fight. And so he didn't let him choose. And so Abner killed Ishmael in the process. So who do you think would be mad about that? Huh? David probably would be mad a little, yeah? Anyone else? Like a specific person who's related to Ishmael. The mother would be probably mad too, but not something I'm talking about. The brothers would get mad. Specifically, Joab got very, very furious. But he kept it to himself. And so, oh, sorry. Joab kept it to himself, and he resented Abner completely. Now, David had grown in power, and more people respected him and feared him. So Ishbosheth was getting scared, and even in his own army, he declared Abner as betraying him, saying that he slept with his father's concubines, And so Abner was a very righteous man, and he said this was incorrect, and he was furious when he heard about this, because this was a grave offense in Israel at the time, like saying that you slept with someone else's wife. And so, because that would break, which commandment would that break? Yeah, adultery. Yeah. So he was furious about that. So in so doing, he actually joins, who do you think he joins? David. He joins David because of that. And who do you think would be not so happy about that? Saul's dead. There's someone specific, Joab. Joab was not happy. So when Abner joins, David allows him to join. Even though he killed his nephew, he still allows him to join. However, Joab is furious and deceives Abner and takes him away and privately kills him. How do you think David was about this? Because he killed his nephew. So how do you think David felt? Mad? Anyone else? Mad? What do you think he would feel? Abner killed his nephew. You saying mad? Sad? So David was quite mad and sad, actually, both. So David was furious at Joab, but he couldn't do anything because he loved him too much. And he wept bitterly for the death of Abner. And it talks about it in the chapter a lot. If you can see the picture, that's a pretty good description. And he fasts in mourning and telling everyone that a great prince has fallen today. And as it shows there, he curses Joab's household and Joab himself, so including his brother as well, who orchestrated the assassination as well. Meanwhile, we still have the other king, who was the other king of Israel. Yeah, the long name, yeah. Him, Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth. Yeah. And he's actually assassinated, so no more of him. So he's assassinated, and by his two companions, and they report to David. And how do you think David would feel about this, considering the previous assassinations that happened and his responses? How do you think he would feel? What's the same way? Yeah. So he's furious again, and he's sad as well, and he kills the two men who killed Ishbosheth. Yeah. George, you want to go?
Okay, so I'm going to be talking over here, but just keep looking ahead at the screen because I'll be talking there. So, in this next part, David becomes king of Israel. So all the tribes of Israel came before David and declared him king, and he made a covenant with them all at Hebron, which is the burial place of Abraham. Now, just as a discussion, would anyone like to know why they swore this oath at Hebron? Just chuck an answer out there. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, any other guess? This is just a conversation. There's no right or wrong answer. This is just to get you guys talking a bit. So, why do you think they made a covenant with David at Hebron? No one else?
Any other reason?
Any others? No? Okay. We'll just move on. So David begins the conquest of Jerusalem and completely annihilates the Jebusites. He names it the city of David, or stronghold of Zion. Now, if you notice, in the liturgy a lot, Abuna would always say Zion, or whenever we would sing hymns and praises, we would always use Zion. This is the stronghold or the city that David captured in 2 Samuel.
What What city is this? What city do you think this is right here? Like the stronghold of Zion, city of David? No, no. Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a city. Yeah, that's Jerusalem. It wasn't called Jerusalem at the time, stronghold of David, the book.
Okay, so this next part is the return of the ark. Now, look at this. Cool. Lightning striking a man, touching the ark. So, David gathered 30,000 men, and they brought forth the ark of God into Israel, and David and all the tribes celebrated with all instruments. However, as they were walking, an oxen stumbled into a man. The man touched the ark of the covenant and died. Now, it was law that no one could touch this, and if you did, you would die on the spot. Would anyone want to try and say and guess why? Why can't you touch the ark of the covenant?
Because it's supposed to be holy or something like that.
Okay, it's supposed to be holy.
Because it's pure and our sins are not. So when we touch it, we're adding like impurity on it.
Okay, that's a very good observation.
It's because the Ark of the Covenant is like the presence of God, and if like even when Moses couldn't even see God, so and like his face was like shining, so if you imagine like let's say you just like you touch God, then it would make sense you would like die on the spot because of how like holy and like how much power God has. Like you can't even see him without dying. So if you touch him, then it makes sense to die.
Yeah, good. You've pretty much answered pretty well there. Yeah, so like it is like no one is allowed to touch this because this is where currently God resides as they travel. So the ark was set to enter to Jerusalem, and as it was, Michal, the daughter of Saul and wife of David, seeing how joyous he was dancing with the common folk, was ashamed. Now,
Do you guys remember her? She's from the first Samuel. She's pretty important. She's one of the reasons why David even fought Goliath in the first place. No? So this is Saul's daughter. So David was promised Saul's daughter if he beat Goliath. And if you remember, it caused a lot of problems, and he left Israel as well because Saul envied him afterwards.
yeah, so why do you think Michal was ashamed with David dancing with the common folk? Why was Michal ashamed of this? Why wasn't she celebrating with David? Why wasn't she like being happy with David and celebrating? Why was she ashamed?
Because someone just died and dancing, in our religion, dancing's like bad.
Okay.
Kinda, like offensive.
Okay. So then would you say what they were doing was wrong entirely of dancing and celebrating with instruments? Okay, we'll move on. Anyway, so Michal was ashamed. I believe the reason is because
She was dancing joyously, and if you remember, she's a daughter of Saul, so she's a high class person in royalty, and so him dancing with the common folk was seen very obscure. She's never seen anything like this before. So even David came from humble beginnings, so when he did so, it seemed like normal to him, but to her it seems outrageous.
yes.
And so the next point afterwards, David tells her that God selected him over her father. So Saul never brought back the covenant, but David did. So thus he's allowed to praise God joyously.
And due to her bitterness, she died barren. So, okay. So this next part talks about David desires to build a house for God, God's love for David, and his promise. So David desires to build a house for God as he lives in a house of cedar while the Ark of the Covenant sits in a tent curtain. Now, what would this be called that would be famously known throughout all of the Old Testament? What would be the name of this place that David wanted to build for God?
A temple.
The temple, yes. So this was the beginning. This was the beginning of the temple. And the building, by the way, this is a question for all of you. Did David build the entire temple? Yes, true or false? Okay, who can answer? Who finished the completion of the temple?
Solomon.
Correct. Perfect. So this will be talked about later in Kings, but just remember, David did not build the entire temple himself. He foresaw it, and then he started it, and then Solomon ended up finishing it. Okay, so just remember that. So God speaks directly through Nathan the prophet, who was a prophet in
Wait,
the land.
why wasn't David not allowed to build it? Sorry?
Because he was a man of war, and
Exactly. Exactly.
the person who builds the temple has to not be in a war before and like a man of peace.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's right.
Wow, you guys are very good. This is very impressive. I'm very impressed with you guys. Okay. So next part, so God speaks directly through Nathan the prophet. So he was just in the land telling David that God took them out of Egypt and allowed them to prosper in Israel and has been with David always. So this pretty much shows that David, no matter how much he sinned, no matter how much he always rebelled against God, God would always and God had always been with him. However, there is a twist at the end that I think will be very fun. So so in Samuel chapter 7 verse 4 to 16, do you want to explain that, Hurry?
Yeah, it's just highlighting David being with God, or God being with David all his life, from like his youth up until when he was grown till now. He gave him the kingdom of Israel, and even he talks about like how he brought the Israelites out of Egypt as well. Yeah, it's very nice. If you read it, it's really good.
So God tells David of the coming of Christ and the second kingdom. Because out of which seed did Jesus say he would come from? Seed of who? I heard someone say it.
He came from the seed of David.
Yes, correct. He did come from the seed of David. So, this is where prophecies come involved, and this is where, they began to foreshadow the coming of Christ. So, David gives amazing praise to God. So, from chapter 7, 18 to 29, it's just a beautiful praise that David sings. So David gives amazing praise to God. He continues to conquer Israel's past enemies, defeats the king of Zobah, Moab, some which he spares, Syria and others. David specifically made a name for himself when returned from killing 18,000 Syrians in the Valley of Salt. This was a very important battle. This was very, and it really, made himself known. Made a name for himself. So, his reputation grew even more. So, he was, very, very popular. Many years had passed since the death of Jonathan. Jonathan had a son who was a lame infant at the time of his death. So I cannot imagine what it's like to have your father die when you are so young. So, but
Wow.
yeah. So
Oh, 1 sec. How do you guys think? How did he become lame? No. How did he become lame? I don't think I said exactly on there. So how did he become lame? Lame, like he can't walk. Does anyone know? No, not disease. So when Saul, the nursing maid of Jonathan's son, actually dropped Jonathan's son while she heard the news about Jonathan's passing, and so his leg was completely gone, so he can never walk again.
So, moving on, the infant was dropped due to the nurse hearing the news of his father's death and was a result named Mephibosheth. So, Mephibosheth later on would play a very important role in this story, in this book. And so when the nurse found out that his father died, they dropped him. So for me, David shows mercy. So David goes out of his way to meet Mephibosheth, wishing to grant mercy onto the house of Saul, essentially saying that he wants to have peace with them. This is the starting of negotiations so that they can all stop this fighting. Mephibosheth prostrates before David, which is what he's doing here. In fear, he will be killed, and David tells him that to not fear and that he will eat at his table continually for his father and grandfather's sake. So even though they were battling for years and years, David always had that care and compassion, even for his worst enemy. which is a very important lesson that we should take from this, is that no matter how much our enemies pursue us or how much they try and like, or how much the world is against us, you know, we should always show kindness and caring to them. So he tells David he should look upon such a dead dog as I. So David, even being humble to himself, like saying that he himself is not perfect, he himself is not like the one, like the invincible or like this divine power. Like he's just like, he even says he's worse than him, saying should look upon such a dead dog as I. So he also tells Ziba, who was a servant of Saul and all his household, to serve Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem.
So, what characteristics can you call of David so far, thus far? What can you call of him? Like, what does he sound like to you from the stories? Compassionate, humble, strong too, yeah. Respectful of his enemies, yeah, that's a key part. So, how many times did he show mercy to his enemies thus far? Like, if you remember 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, how many times did he show mercy to his enemies? Or people who hated him?
5.
5? Okay, can you name 5 or? Just the name occurrences. Just no, can you name occurrences?
I don't know the name. I guess. But I don't.
I just he shows mercy to Jonathan's son. See you? Oh, behind.
The son of Jonathan.
Yeah, son of Jonathan.
Saul's son.
Abner was David's nephew.
No.
Or sorry, he killed
Who's
Joab.
Abner?
Was one of them.
Who's Abner?
Didn't he kill Joab?
Who?
He killed Joab?
No, you got mixed up.
Oh, Joab killed Abner.
No. No. Yeah, he is supposed to accuse him. And then he left. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I tried to highlight from here from before that David has been really merciful or really compassionate, really kind, because from here on, it's almost you'll see. So has anyone heard of Bathsheba or David and Uriah? Have you heard of any of those names? Great. Yeah, she was. Any more information? This is probably the most famous story in this book. Yeah. No, you're right. Right. And then just one more detail.
It should be in the front of the war so that he could die quickly, and then David would be able to marry Bathsheba.
Yeah. So those are like the 3 key points of the story. So I don't think I need to say much, but David stays away from battle and stays in the city, and he sees Bathsheba, and then he sleeps with her, and then knowing that she has a wife, Uriah the Hittite, and Uriah doesn't know about this, and he's in war currently in the Battle of Rabbah. And now he was in trouble because Bathsheba was expecting a child. So what does he do? She just said, but anybody else? What does he do? Yeah, so he gets her husband killed. So he sends her into battle, and he gets her killed. Gets him killed. Now how does he do so? If you guys know the story so well, how does he? But like, how does he let him? How does he do that? Like, what happened?
Like he put like all the like he kind of like left him to go to war.
Before that, before he was put at the front of the war, he comes back because he's called back by David. What does he do? What does David do? Because if you know about Uriah, he's very loyal. He was very loyal, and he liked David a lot, and he liked Joab, everybody.
Oh, wait, are we talking about what David did to Uriah?
No, so Uriah actually didn't leave David's side when he was called back, and he said that I can't go home yet because I have to be serving in the army because I can't do it because my brethren are fighting right now and I can't leave them behind. And so what does David do? What does David do to like send him home or send him back to war? Okay, so basically he tells Uriah to take a letter and give it to Joab. Does anyone know what the letter said? Yeah, go to the front lines. Yeah. No, send Uriah to the front lines to die. And so I didn't write it here, but there's like an intricate poem that Joab has to say once Uriah dies back to the messenger, so they don't know that Joab and David orchestrated the whole thing. So he tells David back that, he died, and he tells him one more thing. He tells him one more thing. So Uriah dies in battle, and anything else? Yeah. No. Joab says to David, Uriah has died in battle, and something else. Because Joab's a little bit mad because what happened. Well, no. So Joab actually tells him that he lost a lot of men. So we're currently right now, you may not see it, but David and Joab are not really on good terms right now. And you might not see you won't see at the end of this chapter, but at the start of Kings, you'll see something that occurs, which is the next chapter. And you might be shocked, but if you pay attention to the details, there is something that will happen at the start of Kings. So, as I said, Uriah dies, and David thinks nothing of it and passes on. And are you on? Oh, no, next slide. Yeah. So Nathan the prophet comes to him and tells him a story. So he says, there was a rich man who had many sheep and many, many, many sheep, like infinite amount, you could say, with sheep. And then there was a poor man with one sheep. The poor man raised the sheep as his own. He ate at his table. He gave him his food and drank from his cup. And the rich man had a guest. And it was tradition that once you have a guest, you slaughter the lamb. So the rich man took the poor man's lamb. Do you think this was the right thing to do? Why? Yeah?
One, so he could have spared the rich man could have spared one of his own sheep instead of taking the only one that the poor man has.
Yeah, that's great. And so, who do you think the story was representing? Someone else?
No,
Hurry, do you want to give him a hint?
no, I don't want it. I don't want it.
Hurry, do you want to give him a hint?
No, it's
No.
okay. It's okay. No, it's okay. Okay. Does it represent like Bathsheba and how like David took like Uriah's like wife? from
Yeah.
him?
So David had many, many, many blessings. And I said before in the chapter, God talks to David previously and tells him that God has been with him since he was young. But Uriah, a Gentile who was a part of Israel, he was a Gentile, by the way, a Hittite. He had one lamb, was you could say is Bathsheba, and David took it away. So, how do you think Nathan delivered this? How do you think Nathan delivered this? He didn't curse him, but he gave him another thing. He told him another thing. Exactly. So David's son, I said before, he was expecting, will die. And how do you think David responded to that? David responded to that.
He did a great sin, and that what he did was bad.
Yeah. So yeah, David repented immediately, and he thought about his sin, and he actually wrote one of the most famous psalms you might know. Do you know what psalm that might be? Psalm 50 in Igbeah. Psalm 50 in Igbeah. So 51 in the actual Bible. And so, yeah. Okay. So as someone said, David actually fasted and repented so that God may spare his child from being killed. And in the end, God did not, and the child passed away on the Sabbath. All of Israel was seeing David lament and pour ashes on his head and bow down as a sign of like grievance before the child passed. But when the child passed, he got up, he washed, and he anointed himself, and he went to the temple. And everyone was shocked why he would do that. Why do you think he would do that? Why would he first mourning when the child was alive, but when the child died, he washed himself and he went to the temple. That was it. Or someone else?
When when he washed and he like ate and went to the temple, that's because when the child died, he had nothing to do. Like the child already died, he can't do anything. He can't bring back to life. But when he fasted and put on ashes and cloth, he that's like a sign as that he doesn't like for God to have mercy on his child so that he can't die.
Yeah, exactly. So once that occurred, you're right. He just said it was God's will and he can't do anything about it. And so he would just remain dead. So he can't do anything about it. Do you guys know David's second son? Second son? Second son Bathsheba, sorry. Second son by Bathsheba. Anyone? Solomon? Yeah, Solomon. And so the Lord loved him and called him Jedediah, if you've heard that name. Jedediah, that's... So now we have another conflict. So this is the third main conflict of the story, you could say. And so it's Amon and Tamar. So the conflict I was talking about earlier about Rabbah and the Ammonites has been resolved now. And so it's just it's just this now. So Ammon longed for his sister Tamar. And so he became sick. He became sick because he longed for her so much. But it was improper that he would like her because she was a virgin. So Ammon was given advice by his advisor that he should pretend to be sick in bed, and that when David comes, he tells him to bring Tamar. And so he does so, and he tells him to bring Tamar, and then so that she could feed him. And then afterwards, he lies with her, but she does not want to, but he does. And so he forced her, and then afterwards hated her and forced her to leave, which was even worse than forcing her. And so as doing so, she poured ashes on her head, and all of Israel would know. And she tore her robes of many colors, symbolizing her virginity. So now Tamar actually had a brother who's pretty important. Do you know his name? His name? No, Tamar, because David had many children, but not a half brother, but a full-blooded brother.
The past story, we heard about it. Can someone quickly say the story about Amnon and his sister Tamar? Can someone know the story of Amnon and Tamar? What happened? Who has? I want بس تجيب our time is limited حبايبي. Loud and clear.
Okay, so Amnon works. So Amnon works with someone to like plot so that he can like force Tamar to like lie with him, and then after he does it, he like hates her after that, and like that's an even greater sin.
Very good. Thank you so much. So he thought that he really loved her very much and he wanted to sleep with her. But what happened? He hated her. So the feeling he had before, it was just a delusion, like, thinking that really he loves her. But we really should think about our feelings and watch out about what our behavior is. In the beginning, he thought, oh, yes, yeah, I want her. But he told her, go out after. And he hated her more than he did thought that he loved her. It wasn't a real love, habibi. We should really be careful about our feelings and try to always sanctify our thoughts and our mind, our hearts. ماشي حبايبي. Anyone has anything to say about this story before we move on? Okay, someone else had. Where is Bishoy? Yeah. Sorry, حبيبي, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Joe.
So, due to the sake of time, we're gonna hold some questions till the very end if we have time.
Is it?
So, moving on, Absalom. So, Absalom, her brother, learned of what occurred, but told her that she should not take it to heart, and Tamar stayed in Absalom's house. When King David learned of this, he was furious, however, did nothing due to him committing a similar act not too long ago, as well as his love for his son. Because if David were to do this, he would be considered a hypocrite, because he did this a long time ago, and now he's criticizing someone for doing something that he just did, if you get what I mean. Absalom showed no resentment to Ammon, but in his heart hated him exceedingly. Again, this goes back to what was said of how even David's people in David's household would despise him, and his concubines would go to his neighbors and stuff, as Huri stated previously.
The prophecy earlier, if you remember that Nathan said to him.
Yes. So after 2 years, Absalom held a banquet and invited all of the king's sons and got Ammon drunk and killed him. So, yeah, so this was just an excuse. Absalom just did this as an excuse so that he can get Ammon drunk so that he can kill him after. He then fled in fear of his father because he didn't know what David would do. So, return of Absalom. So 2 years pass. David's heart was heavy with the loss of his two sons. Joab, seeing David distraught, pleaded with David to bring Absalom back, and David and in time greeted him and kissed him. However, Absalom schemed and started to rise early morning to go to the gates of the king. When anyone in Israel would come to have a lawsuit or any matters, they would come to the king for a decision. Absalom then greeted them at the gate, saying, "The king is too busy for you. However, if I were king, I would give justice." So here we see Absalom trying to manipulate, trying to sneak his way into becoming king, and this was where we would see his feelings telling him and his thoughts telling him that he should be the next king. in doing so, Absalom stole the hearts of the Israelites. And so because of this, the Israelites started to go towards Absalom. So Absalom then told David that he would like to go to Hebron to pay his vow to the Lord, saying that if he returned to Israel, he will serve God. David let him go, and Absalom then sent spies across all of Israel, telling them to declare that Absalom reigns in Hebron. So he already believes now at this point that he himself is king. So he goes and he tells, and he goes to spot, and he sends spies telling people that Absalom reigns. Absalom then took his unsuspecting soldiers and Ahithophel, one of David's wise counselors. If you notice, Ahithophel is actually said in the liturgy, but I'll talk about that after. Then a messenger came to David telling him, the hearts of Israel are with Absalom, and David fled with all his household except for 10 of his concubines. Now, notice how this is all tying together. This is all very connected with each other. David told his loyal subjects and friends not to follow him, for they do not have to endure his pain, and to join Absalom. However, some stayed. So David, with how mighty and with how powerful he is, he managed to convince his subjects to stay with him and not to follow Absalom. So David was traveling to Bahurim, and there was a man named Shimei, who was from the tribe of Saul, and he threw stones at David. So he cursed David, calling him and his servants bloodthirsty men. David said, his servants came to him and he asked him, "Can we kill this man? Because this man speaks against you." But David said no, because the Lord had said to him, "Curse David." So David is well aware of his mistakes, that he knows that the reason why he's doing this because God told this man, Shimei, to curse David and throw stones at him. Ahithophel told Absalom to go with David's concubine so that David will hate him in front of Israel to get stronger and to grow his reputation. So, again, going back to the prophecy that Nathan told David. So, Ahithophel's pursuit and David's escape. So Ahithophel promised Absalom that he will strike the king. So, as quick context, Ahithophel was David's counselor, and then he switched over to the side of Absalom. He was one of the people that Absalom convinced. Hushai instills doubt in Absalom, telling him that David is mighty and they are enraged. So Hushai is David's ally, but Absalom doesn't know that. So Hushai tells Absalom to gather all of Israel to go against David. So Hushai knew that David was so powerful that Absalom with his army would not be able to conquer David. He would need all of Israel, but obviously he did not at the time. Absalom declares that Hushai's advice is better than Ahithophel's. Hushai then sent messengers to David telling him how to escape from Absalom. So this was a very smart, genius play that he did by saying, by giving Ahithophel advice to gather all of Israel and then using that as an excuse to tell David to escape. When Ahithophel found out, he hung himself and he died. The battle against Absalom. So the battle finally happens. David sends the people into battle.
George.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Like, who's his sister? Yeah, who's his sister? You said it pretty fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tumer.
You're close. You're close. You're close. It's just yeah. You Tamar. Tamar was the one that yeah, she was the girl. Amnon Silva. What did he do to get the throne?
Iowa King and stuff like that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we want to hear the answer. Who will say the answer clear حبيبتي هانا about طبعا انت you know it say
He was convincing people like
that
I
he
don't
can
know.
do better than
Yeah.
his dad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Nayomi. So he tried to stay at the door and try to tell people I can do better than my dad, right, Habibi? And what happened? And then after that, people knew him, and he went to have the people around him to get his dad out of the
He
kingdom.
sent spies
Okay,
everywhere
that's
across
right.
the country.
What
And
else was it? Yeah. After that, we heard about a name, Shammai. Right? Who is Shammai? قلتيها صح.
He cursed David.
He cursed David. He told him, you are a blood like shedding person, right? طب خلاص.
Why did he
كده.
curse David, saying
Why?
he's a
Yeah, bravo.
blood-shedding person?
Someone knows why?
Just
Why
why?
did-
It didn't say, but why? It said like sort of. Why did he curse him?
God sent him to because that's what David said.
No. Well, yeah, that's true. He did say that. He did say that. That's true. But that's not the reason why he cursed him. There's another reason why he cursed him. It was because of his descent. Where do you think he was from? Which tribe in Israel? Which tribe? If you remember a certain king's tribe. Oh, no one? Okay. Saul's tribe. It was Saul's tribe. So he was a Benjamite. So he was a Benjamite, and so because obviously Saul and David did not like, well, at the time they fought against each other. So he hated David, and he threw rocks at him when David was at his weakest point, when he was fleeing from his own son. So afterwards, Joab organizes an army to fight against Absalom's army. So the two armies meet in the woods. And does anyone know what happens? You can tell by the picture. Yeah. So his hair gets caught inside in the tree, and then a servant comes and tells Joab and tells him that Abner's caught in the tree. And what does Joab say? Well, Joab says something to him, and it seems in character for him, but it doesn't seem right. What does Joab say to the servants?
I don't know how to explain it, but
Exactly. He said, why didn't you kill him? He was right there. Why didn't you kill him? He said, why didn't you kill him? And so the servant said, because I can't go against my master David, because David told all of them that leave Absalom and have mercy on me. Because David didn't want to lose his other son again. And so Joab takes the spear of the servant and stabs him in the heart, and right there when he's lying in the tree. Yeah, and David weeps bitterly about the death of Absalom, his son. And how do you think Joab feels about this? He's furious. Like this is probably one of the worst he's ever been. So when he hears about this, he hears about how the fact that David's crying that they killed Absalom. He tells him, "Why are you crying for our enemies? And that we fought for you, and you don't shed a tear for us. So why are you crying for Absalom, who fought and tried to kill you and take your throne?" Would you think he was justified? Think he was justified? Joab's justified? Okay. It wasn't really like it wasn't really justified because you're not. It was sort of justified because he was weeping for his enemy, but at the same time, David was a compassionate person, as I said throughout the story, and he wept for all of his enemies. So it was just in character for David. George, you want to wrap it?
So we're about to finish. Don't worry, this will be quick. So another sub-story that happens is the rebellion of Sheba. So Sheba, who was a Benjamite, sounded the trumpet and told the people that they have no share in the land with David. Men deserted David and followed Sheba, but a few stayed. So essentially, the Benjamites felt like they were not being treated well. They felt like they had no share. They had no inheritance in the land. And so they decided to rebel. Joab and Abishai pursued Sheba. And then a wise woman, this is a fun story, a wise woman tells Joab that Sheba's head will be thrown over the wall. which is pretty cool. So more victories of David. So David avenges the Gibeonites because Saul had sought to kill them. So the Gibeonites asked David to deliver 7 descendants of Saul so that they can be killed. There was 4 total giants that fell by the hand of David and his servants. So essentially, the Gibeonites came to David for a favor. David delivered on that favor. And then on top of that, there was 4 total giants that fell by the hand of David. This would presume to be Goliath and his brothers. He then praised God for the deliverance of the people. And finally, the conclusion of the book, David has a census conducted of the people of Israel. However, God did not like that he was boasting his might and forced a plague on all of Israel. Now, really quickly, he didn't just choose the plague. So what happened was, when God saw what David did, he gave David 3 options. Either 1, have 7 years of famine; 2, have his enemies pursue him for 3 months; or 3, have a plague that happens for 3 days. So David chose the 3 days plague. He sought to gain God's favor and built an altar, and God heard his prayers and lifted the plague. So essentially, yeah, that's all we got.
So Bishoy?
Do you want to use it?
Yeah, I have some questions, and while they're setting it up, I have questions. So, who was the father of the leper that David took in, or the lame man? Who was the father of the lame man that David took in?
Damn it.
The father of the lame man. Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan. It was Jonathan. How long did Absalom live in Jerusalem? How long did Absalom leave Jerusalem and leave Israel? Leave Jerusalem. Leave Israel for 2 years. He left Israel for 2 years. He left Israel. Yeah, I just said okay. How many concubines did David leave in his house? How many concubines did David leave in his house? 10. Who was the commander of Saul's army? Anyone else? Yeah, Abner.
Okay.
You did, but don't get. Set up. I don't know if you guys remembered. Hello. I don't if you guys remember, but David said, hello. Stop, guys. So David said to his people, he said, so and so is better than Ahithophel. Who was that? So and so is advice is better than Ahithophel's advice. Do you remember? Okay. So he said so and so's advice is better than better than Ahithophel's. Who was that person? Does anyone remember? He was a spy. He was a spy against no, I just said that. No. No, not David. So the man was an ally of David, but he joined Absalom's camp. And then Absalom believed him to be on his side. So he said, this person's advice is better than Ahithophel's. Who was that person?
Does his name start with an I?
No. Anybody? So it was actually Hushai. Hushai. So when George was talking about it, Hushai was actually David's ally, and David tells him to leave and join Absalom so that he can help David in a different way. Anything else? Who who prays in the book? There's only one person that prays in the book. Who's yeah, it's David prays in the book. David was the one who prayed in the book. Um Um, what was the punishment that David accepted when God gave him options? He gave him 3 options. You answered a lot. Anybody else? Anybody else? Just anybody else hasn't answered much. I said who was what was the decision David picked for the curse that God gave him? Anybody? Okay. 3-day plague. It was 3-day plague. Are you good? Are you good now?
Okay, we're almost done. But I have to do Jesus in the book. Can you please put the next slide? Next slide. I have a question for you guys. Why do we need to learn about the Old Testament and how we can see Jesus in the Old Testament? Anyone? It's not on the screen. Give me an example of how or why do we need to see Jesus in the Old Testament? Or how can we do that? And why do we need to learn about it? Anyone? Anyone who hasn't answered yet? Kereya.
Because like people say that like God of the Old Testament is different than the God in the New Testament. So like when we learn about it, then we know that they're basically the same God.
Yeah. Well, what I have here, the Old Testament is revealed to us in the New Testament. Like Melchizedek and how he gave Abraham bread and wine. And now we know that that was a symbol of the new covenant that Jesus would give to us later. Next slide. Now, King's mercy and grace. David's actions of mercy and grace towards Saul's family. David's actions of mercy and grace towards Saul's family, practically Jonah's son, reflects Jesus' own mercy and grace extended to us. Despite our brokenness and unworthiness, Jesus invites us to his table and offers us a place in his kingdom through the abundant love and mercy and grace. Next slide. The king's compassion. David's compassion toward the people of Israel and his willingness to listen to their concerns demonstrates the heart of a true and good king. The compassion finds it perfect to fulfill in Jesus, who through his compassion on the multitudes heals the sick, and welcomes the outcasts. Jesus is moved with compassion and desires to meet our deepest and most inner needs. Last one. The covenant of love. David's deep friendship with Jonathan and his commitment to fulfill his covenant with Jonathan's descendants foreshadows the new covenant of love that Jesus establishes through sacrificial love extended to all humanity, offering forgiveness, reconciliation, and eternal life through faith in Jesus. Last one. Let's all stand to pray. Through the intercessions of Saint Mark, Saint Mary, and all our saints, make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on the earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And through grace, forgive us our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, glory, forever and ever.